Okay, people, what are we here to talk about? We're going to keep talking about Daystar, but I'm not talking about it like everyone else is talking about it. And I hope you guys can see that. I still say I just don't like the way I see some of the Christian influencers, the one that has been in the center of this Daystar saga, as Laura Lynn Tyler puts it, saga. Uh, I don't like the way that they're talking. I don't like the way that they're handling this. I don't like the things that they're saying. Listen, I hear a lot of stuff. Why I saw somebody say today, and I guess it's a question: is Joanie Lamb in heaven or in hell? Okay, do we really know? Well, let's be honest. Do you really know if Joanie's in heaven or hell right now? I don't. All I can do is speculate, and all I can do is hope. And that's all we can do for anyone unless we know for sure how that person lived and how that person died. Okay? It's not just about running the race, it's running it well, but finishing strong. And Joanie ran a good race, but I'm not sure if Joanie finished strong. Okay, so whether, let's say, is she in heaven? Well, she made Christ her confession of faith. However, recent events show that uh, Joanie really didn't forgive her son. Joanie possibly could have died with unforgiveness in her heart. She could have died with anger in her heart. I can only speculate about that because, you know, I'm a mother. This is my only son. This is my only child. If I was separated from my only son, okay, or any of my children, and I knew that at any moment I'm going to leave this earth, I'm going to write them a note. I'm going to call them up if I can get to them, put them on the phone. I want to see my child. But she did none of this. From what I'm getting from the influencers is that Jonathan got the call from the lawyer. So you can see where this is going to go right now. Anyway, he didn't get the phone call from his siblings. And I know a lot of people talk about Rebecca and JWs being the spirit-filled ones and the people with the integrity. But at least we forget they sold out. They betrayed Jonathan. They sold themselves out by JW, not given the rights to have that letter that he wrote about Pete/Joshua published. Okay. And when they went down to the courtroom, they really didn't give out all the details. They went and they lawyered up. Okay. So there's some betrayal there. So I'm not putting my money on the horse of JW and Rebecca to do the right thing because to me, if they had the integrity that people are talking about, don't you think that Rebecca would have called her older brother and said, "You need to get here. Mom is dying"? Don't you think that she would have said, "I don't care what you guys say. He has a right to see his mother. We can put this aside and just let him see his mother"? Apparently, he got the call from the lawyer. Okay, so where is Joanie at? Based on that, can I speculate? Well, if you don't forgive others, Jesus said himself, "My Father in heaven won't forgive you." Did she forgive Jonathan? Did she make peace with Jonathan? The way it seems like she didn't. The way it seems right now, it seems like she carried that animus against her son all the way to the end. Okay, I don't know that. I can only speculate. And if she did that based on not about how she ran her race, because she ran it well, it indicates she didn't finish strong. But I'm not going to say for sure. I'm going to hope and pray because you don't want anybody to go to hell. People are talking about this like, they want Joanie to burn in hell. I don't want Joanie to burn in hell. I don't want my worst enemy to burn in hell. I don't want anybody. If any Christian really understood what Jesus talked about hell and what hell is and what awaits a person in hell and all the attributes and verbs and adjectives that describe hell. I don't care how bad anybody does you. You don't want anybody to go to hell. So a lot of these guys are really talking like Joanie's in hell. I'm not. Personally, I'm going to hope that I see Joanie in heaven one day. And I hope that Joanie left some markers for her son. Maybe she left a video for her son. Maybe she left a note for her son. Something that cleans this mess up. I hope she did that. If she didn't, then I won't see Joanie, but it won't matter to me. But that's just on Joanie. And that's all I got to say about that. I don't think it's right for us to try to say you want Joanie in hell because of what she did and all this stuff. No, I don't want nobody. Who wants anybody to go to hell? Okay? That's just that. I'm going to drop that. Okay? Now, this session really is about where do we go from here? Okay? This is and what did she say? It's a saga of biblical proportions. Okay? But man, you can find this on any primetime soap channel. You can find it on General Hospital. You can find it on The Young and the Restless. You can find it on Dynasty. You tell them my age. Dallas, Falcon Crest. You name it. All of these components of a family rivalry over $1 billion empire exist. But one can speculate what really happens after this. If Joanie didn't finish strong, I believe her and Tom, evidenced by the lawyer calling Jonathan, that I can only speculate that Joanie made it perfectly clear that Jonathan's not to come back to Daystar in any way, shape, or form. She may have even cut Jonathan out of her will. Okay? Now, what does that really mean? And why don't they want Jonathan back at Daystar? Well, let's be honest about it. If Jonathan and SUZY came back at Daystar, the first thing they're going to do is clip Pete. That's the first thing you're going to do. You may clip Rebecca, you may clip, JW, but you're going to clip Pete. And that's going to have a problem with Rachel, who is the power there, who's the anchor there. Okay? So they don't want, I'm sure Joanie knew that if this guy walks back in there with SUZY, all hell is going to break loose in there. Now, you can say hell breaking loose because we want hell to break loose. So, hell going to break loose. Pete, Joshua is going to get clipped, okay? And maybe then they can start to put the pieces together. But you can't still put the pieces together because this just is not about $1 billion empire. At the heart of this disagreement, at the heart of this silvering rivalry is not about money and power. It's about a child who the parents are saying that their sibling husband abused. This can't be settled by who comes back to Daystar. But if you keep Jonathan out of Daystar, you continue the illusion that Joshua Brown did nothing wrong. Okay, so they don't want this guy back, okay? Now, here's what we do know, okay? That there are documents, and I know that you've seen the documents. Laura Tyler, she showed the documents that Marcus wrote, basically saying, listen, Joanie's in charge if I die, and after Joanie dies or retire, it all goes to Jonathan. That's a legal document because the document says it was ratified by the board, of which Jonathan and Joanie and his siblings were all ratified, that letter, okay? There's also another document that was shown that basically said, if anything happens to Joanie and myself, these are the steps I want Daystar and Word of God Faith to take. And all of those steps, no matter which one you go, put Jonathan at the head of Daystar. It put his two sisters around him. So to be perfectly honest, legally, Rebecca and Rachel's positions are secure. JW is not secure, and Joshua Brown is not secure. But all of the four of them, meaning Rachel, Rebecca, JW, and Joshua, keeps their job if they can keep the status quo. If they can continue to keep Jonathan at bay, everything keeps going like it is. But there's a lot of different variables in there. Number one variable right now is good old Doug Weiss. Where does Doug fit into this legally? Well, we got Doug on tape saying with Jonathan and Jimmy Evans that if something happens to Joanie, I'm going to write it down. I don't want any part of Daystar. Whether he did that or not, his voice made it clear. Okay? But again, what trumps all this? What trumps all this is Marcus's letters and directives. Legally, I'm not an attorney, I'm not offering legal advice, but one would assume, and I'm not should be able to assume if you ever watched The Odd Couple, but one can speculate that this guy, all he needs to do is go get him a good lawyer. Go get him a good lawyer and take those tapes and take Marcus's emails that have been publicized all over the place that he ratified with the board of directors. And it doesn't matter what JONI could have done. I'm not a lawyer, but I would say it doesn't matter what steps JONI made to X out her own son. The bottom line was the president of the company said, this is how I want to go down. Now, one could also say that if this turns into a legal fight, they tried to tarnish Jonathan's employment so bad, the way they fired him for cause, that they may say he's too incompetent to run Daystar. And so therefore, they may turn around and try to use that as an angle. And if they did use that as an angle, one would only wonder, where would Rebecca and JW come into play? And where would Rachel come into play? Would they support that? Because personally, I believe that Rebecca and JW will continue the betrayal. They will continue the betrayal. Because right now you got to wonder, what happens to Joanie's money? Okay, they had mortgages. Would those mortgages now be forgiven? Will they get enough from her will that they can pay, and they're debt free? If they're debt free, would that change how they view this and how they come clean with the truth? I don't think so. I think they tarnished themselves. They can't go back on it. They can't come back and say, oh, I did. Unless they came out and said, I did this because mommy had my mortgage. They are not going to reverse course. They are not going to reverse course. Rachel is not going to reverse course. But I believe that Jonathan has a legal right at this point, because personally, all Jonathan had to do was play the long game. All he had to do was sit back and say, okay, I'm just going to sit here and lay low, because if something happens to mom, it's all going to come to me to control. Right now, something happens to mom that happened to his mother. Now he has legal right. He's got legal claim to take those letters and go to an attorney and say, I want my rightful place as the head of Daystar. You know what I think may happen? I think before that happens, because listen, the last thing Daystar need is a public battle over this billion-dollar empire. Just imagine what that will look like to all of their Christian clients. Okay, Christians suing each other. Imagine how that will look to all the people that tune in. Imagine what that will look like if Jonathan did discovery and he start pulling people in and they start asking for evidence and demanding the letter from JW and all this other stuff. So I think what's going to happen is good old Tom, who called the dude about his mother's passing, from what I understand, is probably going to offer him a deal. They probably offer him, they don't want him back, because they know the havoc that would happen if he came back. What they're going to probably offer him is a boatload of money. They're probably going to say, you know what? We're going to give you this, this, and this if you just sign off any claim to Marcus's will or any claim to Daystar. That's what they're probably going to do. The fact that the lawyer called the dude about his mother tells you where this is headed. It's headed to the courts. And if it heads to the courts, he's got a right. And I think that lawyers will prevail, and lawyers will turn around and say, hey, listen, let's offer this dude some money. Let's try to settle this. I don't think that Jonathan will take it. If Jonathan holds true to the standards of integrity that him and Suzy has thus far displayed, I think they're going to say, no, this was my father's wish, and this is what I want. Okay? Maybe that happens. We'll have to wait and see and play it out. What would be my advice to Jonathan Lamb right now? I don't know the guy. Obviously, everybody else got him on speed dial. He's been sharing his life with, Laura and Pastor Ray and all these other guys. But what could a guy like me offer in terms of advice? And I want to know with you, if you could talk to Jonathan, what would you advise him to do right now? My advice to Joanie Lamb, whether he ever finds it out or not, I would say run silent and run deep. I would say go dark. I would say right now, stop feeding information to Laura. Stop feeding information to Ray or anybody that calls you. I would not give them out any information at all. Because the more information that continues to get publicized, it puts you in a negative light. There's a difference between a legal light and a negative light. But the bottom line is, Daystar is a company that is built on the image of the people. And to be honest, a lot of people have said, you shouldn't have done this to your mom and all this other stuff. I would try to correct that. I would try at this point in time now, I would continue to go dark, and I would just say, listen, I'm not saying anything else. It's a family matter. Just keep us in prayer. I would not give out any information for someone to say, just to say, oh, I've talked to Jonathan today, or I talked to Suzy today. I wouldn't do it. Because just like everybody else, just like Rebecca and JW and Rachel especially, who put a lot of stuff out on the internet, everything you say out there too can come back at you. I would not talk to anybody right now. And I would also add that you really need to step back and take a look at who you can trust, Jonathan. You're a trusting individual. And I know right now to say this, a lot of people will get mad at me. But you know what? A lot of people that have backed your play are probably saying, you know what? If this guy comes back in charge and comes back to power, it's just like David. When David came back into power, he remembered Jonathan. So David comes back into power. Jonathan comes back into power. Maybe Jonathan will remember these people, these influencers, and give them a spot on the new Daystar. I'm not saying people are selfish enough and cunning enough to think about that, but you have this human nature. Someone could be wondering, I wonder what will happen if Jonathan gets back in charge. Maybe I'll get me a spot. Maybe I'll have this. Maybe I'll be able to come on there like Marcus Rogers did, sit in a big chair and give my story. I don't know. But the way that they're playing this, my advice to Jonathan would be go dark right now, pal. Run silent, run deep. That's it. Let your mother be buried. I don't know if he will even have access to that, but let your mother be put to rest. Let the dust settle, and then basically come out swinging. If nobody comes back to you and say, Jonathan, when are you coming to take charge? We're going to honor your father's will. We're going to honor what he said. If nobody comes back to do that, then I would go scorched earth. I would bring the house down. I would burn the house down if I had to, because you're not just fighting for yourself at this point where Daystar is concerned. You're fighting for the legacy of your father who wanted something to happen, and his wishes are not being honored. So if you go scorched earth, that means you have to do everything you can do. You can't try to save Rebecca. You can't try to save JW. You got to go for broke. You got to burn the house down to build it back up. Now, that's my advice if there's any advice I could give. What kind of advice would you guys offer him right now? That's what I would do. Run silent, run deep, let your mother get buried, do what you got to do. But remember this. Remember this. The last thing I'm going to say. From The Godfather. Remember what Don Corleone told Michael? The one that comes at you with a deal, that's the ones that's going to betray you. That's the one to look for. When Tom comes with the deal, Tom's not looking out for you. Tom's the betrayer. Okay? Tom is Tessio. Tom is Tessio. If he comes to you with the deal, Tom is Tessio. Remember that. That's what he said to his son, Michael. Remember that. So that's all I'm going to say about this. We need to keep it in prayer. This is different than what everybody else is out there doing. But keep an eye on this whole story right now, because at the heart of it, we're losing sight. I think the influencers are losing sight because right now they're trying to position Jonathan into this big court drama. And he's legally got rights. I get that. But I thought at the heart of this was a little girl that got abused. And I thought at the heart of this was justice. So I want to remind people what this guy started this fight for. This was not about him fighting anything other than justice for his child. Last thing I'm going to say, and I know I said that twice already, is what happens to Doug. My bet is right now, Doug is probably going to, if I'm Doug, knowing Doug the way Doug is, and I've taken a lie detector to prove it, I would probably say Doug is going to raid that house for anything tangible, any jewelry, any gold, any diamonds he can. I'm sure Joanie left Doug some money. Legally, that's her spouse. He's got access to those bank accounts. Now, he said before on the tape he didn't want his name on anything. We don't know how that changed. But if I'm Doug right now, I'm positioning myself to see how I'm going to come out of this. Remember now, this man just left his wife not only a couple years ago. My bet is Doug packs his bag and goes back to beautiful Aunt Lisa. What do you guys say? That's it. Talk to you later.